Trucker Dump, episode 125. On today's show, we got some gift ideas for truckers. Connor Smith from the Big Rig Banter podcast is going to talk about 5 top issues in commercial truck driving. We're going to talk about the new Tesla electric truck. I'll share a mechanical tip I learned from a listener. And in today's main topic, we're going to talk about reserve truck parking. In the feedback section, Renae's going to tell us about her training and being a trainer. Tim's going to point out a problem with one of my books. Ryan thinks he could have solved my overweight problem from the last podcast. Shannon lost a bet with me and had to turn in an audio comment that he really didn't want to do. And Kevin says I screwed up the contest in the last podcast. Oops.
Welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry, and pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you. This podcast is brought to you by AboutTruckDriving.com, resources to help you understand the world of truck driving through the use of stories and a pathetic attempt at humor.
Hello, Trucker Dumpers. Todd McCann here. For those of you new to the podcast, I'm a 20-year trucker, author of 2 trucking books called Trucking Life and How to Find a Great Truck Driving Job. I'm a blogger, obviously a podcaster, and by all accounts, a major dorkopotamus. Today I'm recording at the Petro in Remington, Indiana. Now, I normally go to the Pilot next door, but it's being remodeled, so screw that. Anyway, I've had lots of freight lately, so man, I just barely missed November. I try to kick out one of these podcasts every month. I just barely missed November. I'm sure this is going to be out in the first week of December sometime. Dang it, I was close, but man, I have been running balls to the wall. Wait, where'd that saying even come from? That's kind of a weird saying. Why does balls to the wall mean you're in a hurry? Anyway, I hope you guys had a good Thanksgiving, and I hope you picked up some pretty good Black Friday deals. I know I was looking for that software that I was raving about last time, the Hindenburg journalist software. It never went on sale. I was looking for a new mic that would pick up less noise. It didn't go on sale, the one I wanted either, so well, basically the only Black Friday deal I got was a new WordPress theme for a website. Well, anyway, not sure what I'm going to do with that quite yet. I know the old one is being deprecated, so I have to do something. Anyway, I did get home for Thanksgiving. Last year, I only made it home for 1 Thanksgiving dinner, and this year I made it home for 2. I'm not sure if that is a blessing or a curse, being home for 2 consecutive Thanksgiving dinners, but anyway, none of that really matters. So hey, you might have noticed some formatting changes right at the beginning of the podcast. I have been listening to a podcast called The School of Podcasting, and it's exactly what it says it is, to teach you how to podcast better. And Dave Jackson over there, who I really respect, says that you should always tell your listeners in advance what they're about to hear, all the different things that are going to be in the show, so they know whether they want to maybe prepare to skip some spots or perhaps just skip a whole episode because it just doesn't interest them. So I'm going to try to start doing that just like I did in the beginning of this. I hope that helps you. Actually, listener, what was his name? Ryan wrote in, and I'm not going to read that particular email this time, but he did write me an email saying that something to that effect, that he kind of wished he knew what was coming up in the feedback, because sometimes I like to skip it and then sometimes he doesn't. So apparently Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting is right. So I hope that helps you guys. And to further help you, one thing I'm going to try to do is help you navigate the podcast better. And what I mean by that is there are these things called chapter markers. Basically, it's little timestamps within the podcast, and it enables you that if your podcast app will do this, has this feature, which most of them do nowadays, you'll just be able to hit one button and skip to a next section. So, if I'm talking about a particular app that you're just really not interested in, or I'm doing an interview that you really don't want to hear, you can just tap the button. I can't do that yet, unfortunately. Apple, I use GarageBand, which is an Apple product, and they took out all the good podcasting features, unfortunately. But you know what will do it really well, these chapter markers, is the Hindenburg software that I was talking about that I really wanted for Black Friday and didn't get. Eventually, hopefully I will get that. And hey, that'll help you guys for the show. So now's the time to pitch my stuff. If you ever wanted to help the podcast, I would appreciate it. The best way you can do that is just go buy one of the books. That way you get something for your money. Available on Amazon, iBooks, every place you want to go. Look for Trucking Life or How to Find a Great Truck Driving Job. And I'll put links in the show notes to the descriptions of both of those. And remember, you can go get a free text samples of both of those books from my website or from Amazon or iBooks. They have free samples. Or you can also get a free audio sample of Trucking Life on my website. Again, links in the show notes. Check those out. All right, let's get on with the show. You know, the first thing I have to address is my major screw up. Okay, first, I finally got the Meritor jacket that we gave away in the last podcast. I finally got that out to David Shoemate. We had some address issues and I had to ship it a couple of times. And, well, I learned a valuable lesson that if you're going to send a free gift to somebody, make sure you know the shipping costs before you do it. It's a valuable lesson learned, but hey, now I know. Anyway, David got his jacket. I hope he enjoys it. Well, I think he's got his jacket. Last I heard, it was on its way. So hopefully he's got it by now and he's enjoying it. But Kevin wrote in to say how bad I screwed up. Oh boy, I cannot believe this. Okay, here's what he writes. I guess this is officially feedback, but I just have to address this right up front. He writes, "Hey Todd, I was just listening to the new podcast and noticed you said you had 3 entries for the jacket giveaway. You said the names and I noticed I wasn't one of them. No big deal, I suppose, but I did send the email saying count me in, and you did reply saying it was a done deal. Just thought I'd bring that to your attention. Have a great week. Look forward to the next episode." Oh, wow. You know what? Kevin was exactly right. When I read that email, I let off, well, some not safe words that I can't say on this podcast, and I don't normally say, but I was so upset with myself because I thought, no, wait a second, I didn't. I thought, no way, I screwed that up. But I went back, and sure enough, there was the email saying, "Hey, I've entered you in the contest," like some stupid big dummy. Anyway, I felt so horrible. I wrote him back and asked him if I could maybe send him like the VR goggles that Meritor sent me. And he said he didn't really have any use for them. He wasn't that worried about it. Let me read this. He says, because I wrote back just groveling because that's horrible. I felt awful about this. He said, "Don't beat yourself up, man. It's all good. Really, I kind of feel bad for bringing it up now." Well, you shouldn't, Kevin. I'm glad you brought that to my attention because the next contest, if I ever do another contest after this, I want to make darn sure, this will be on my mind and hopefully, it'll keep me from screwing up the next time around. Anyway, moving on, in the interest of full disclosure, and in case you forgot, I did win the Trucker Country CD at your last giveaway, for which I'm still grateful. I still love and listen to that CD. Well, so do I. Well, at least when it pops up on my shuffle, I listen to it. So anyway, last time I couldn't remember what the previous contest was, and well, Kevin pointed out it was for that Trucker Country CD, and that makes perfect sense. I remember that now. Anyway, he goes on and says, "I thought perhaps being a previous winner might have disqualified me, and you just forgot to tell me. I'd hate for Fox News to have to report on another collusion scandal, and I won a second time. However, if there are no such rules, you can bet your sweet Asper cream I'll be entering the next one too. To answer your question about the VR headset, I wish that I could be like a cool kid, but I must be too much of a wuss. Let alone the stomach-wrenching content-producing trajectory of the virtual roller coaster that my wife seems to love so much. Wow. Yeah, I couldn't handle that one either. This Meritor app was about all I could handle, and it was just kind of bouncing around in the truck. My stomach is not good like that. And speaking of stomachs not being good, when I pulled into this truck stop today, as I pulled in, I noticed a automobile driver standing out by a telephone pole yakking his ever-loving guts up. I don't know what it was, but maybe black beans or something, because it was almost pure black. It was gross, but I felt sorry for him because, he was actually the passenger in a car, which I kind of get that way too in a car sometimes, so I felt horrible for him. But anyway, back to your virtual roller coaster loving wife. So anyway, I just decided that these are kind of cheap goggles, and I didn't really want to send him to him anyway because he deserved better than those goggles. And I just apologized, and I'm glad he's cool with it. But man, I feel awful, and I won't screw that up again. I mean, how bad is that? I got 4 entries, and I screwed it up by leaving one out. Wow, I'm a bonehead. Oh, anyway, moving on. Thanksgiving is under our belts now. Well, literally, actually. But Christmas is on its way, of course. Christmas starts in August anymore. But anyway, if you're anything like me, you really suck at gift giving. I have no idea what to get anybody, probably because I'm out here on the road all the time and I don't know what they want. I don't pick up things in conversation. The evil overlord is really awesome at this stuff, but I really suck at it. What's great about the evil overlord is she will often call me in mid-December and say, hey, you just bought me this purse for Christmas. Thanks a lot. I love that. I mean, not having to shop and put thought into it is absolutely wonderful. And she's cool with it. So, man, does she rock or what? Anyway, gift giving. Like I said, you might suck at it, and maybe just the people in your life suck at picking gifts for you. Well, the good folks over at Factor Finders, that's easyinvoicefactoring.com, same people, they sent me an infographic with some gift ideas for truckers. So I was happy to post it on the site. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. You can check that out. There's some really good ideas. And like I said, you might want to just slip this to somebody who really sucks at buying you gifts. I mean, you really don't need another Grinch-themed tie this year, do you? I hope not. Anyway, thanks to Factor Finders and easyinvoicefactoring.com for sending that over to me. I am really going to love this particular podcast episode, and let me tell you why. Because I'm sure you guys get sick of hearing my voice all the time. You listen, and I'm grateful. But, it is just my voice droning on and on. So, in this particular episode, we have 3 different voices. The first one here is Connor Smith. He does a podcast called Big Rig Banter. He does that with Troy Diffenderfer. Man, I hope I pronounced that right. Sorry if I didn't, Troy. But anyway, he submitted a blog post, and I asked them to turn it into an audio comment, and isn't that great? Because they're already podcasters, so I knew they really had no excuse not to do it. So, here's Connor with his article called The Top 5 Issues in Commercial Truck Driving. And you can find all the links he's going to mention in the show notes. Take it away, dude.
Despite being one of the most ubiquitous industries in the United States, there are a diverse range of pressing issues facing just about everyone in the commercial driving business. Honestly, it's hard to just sit back and let things take their natural course because, as many people in the industry will tell you, this isn't exactly a profession where you can kick back and coast for most of your career. Beyond hiring quality drivers, it takes hard work from each link in the supply chain to keep the flow of goods, services, drivers, and logistics running smoothly. So what top issues in commercial driving are still alive and well? Here we'll take a look at what many people, both recruiters and drivers, are facing on a daily basis and some potential ways to move the industry forward for years to come. Number 1, ELDs in the Supreme Court. As a move that still has many owner-operators voicing their resistance, the Supreme Court's decision to leave in place the electronic logging device ELD rule makes it clear that these devices are here to stay. Essentially, this rule calls for the Secretary of Transportation to adopt the proper regulations requiring ELD use in commercial vehicles driving interstate. After a rejected appeal by the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, the OOIDA, companies must be compliant by December 18, 2017. This means installing the appropriate ELDs in all commercial vehicles made after the year 2000. Despite some obvious benefits to having ELDs in all commercial vehicles, critics have voiced concerns over constant surveillance, strict hours of service tracking, and the initial concerns of installing hundreds of devices in a relatively short amount of time. In any case, the industry is poised to comply to this new law of the land whether they want to or not. Number 2, hours of service. Trailing behind the ELD ruling is perhaps one of the true underlying issues for commercial drivers in the industry, the hours of service regulations themselves. Now with the mandatory compliance meaning an ELD in every commercial vehicle, drivers are no longer able to fudge their paper logs for very good reasons. It used to be that drivers were just 30 minutes away from home after getting caught in traffic that they could just adjust their hours of service, although with ELDs such things are nearly impossible. Although many argue that the issue is not with ELDs themselves but these stringent regulations on hours of service and their corresponding rest times, it's understood now that fighting the ELD rule is really just a veiled attempt to get adjustments made to laws regarding hours of service, which is sure to continue on as an issue, at least for now. Number 3, CSA scores. Launched by the FMCSA in December of 2010, the Compliance, Safety, and Accountability CSA initiative was introduced as a way to improve the overall safety of commercial motor vehicles on the road. The intention was that the CSA program would be a more intense focus on companies that pose higher safety risks on the road than others. Still, many industry interests contend that the factors integrated into CSA scores are not always reliable predictors of safety. Critics say that the inconsistencies in the process of collecting CSA data, in addition to issues about the accountability of crashes, make it difficult to fully assess the commercial driving abilities of individuals. Even though the intention is to restrict lesser qualified drivers from being hired by companies that demand the highest degree of safety, which is most of them, CSAs can haunt drivers for years to come for a variety of reasons that they may or may not have had control over. Number 4, the driver shortage. Characterized by many as a matter of quality of drivers rather than the quantity of people applying for jobs, the driver shortage continues to worsen with little sign of slowing based on reports from the American trucking associations. For almost 2 decades now, this shortage of drivers has made itself known to carriers struggling to find quality drivers to fill their trucks. At the end of the first report in 2005, the shortage was roughly 20,000 drivers, but had since grown to a staggering 48,000 by the end of 2015. Should these trends hold, the shortage is projected to reach almost 175,000 drivers by 2024. As it stands, the driver shortage may actually feel much worse to motor carriers considering all of the previously mentioned issues: increasingly constrictive CSA scores, ELD mandates, and hours of service regulations. Pair this with high turnover rates, and it's as difficult as ever to get the quality drivers needed for the increasing volume of jobs out there, 890,000 over the next decade to be exact. Now many companies are looking to target demographics such as millennial drivers, female drivers, and drivers with military experience to pick up the torch. Number 5, the autonomous vehicle revolution. Although it's not quite the dawn of autonomous vehicles, these highly tech-laden trucks are just about to breach the horizon of the industry. Whether it's Uber, Tesla, Google, or Nikola Motors, it's quite obvious that we're in for a heavily automated transportation industry as these vehicles clear their final hurdles to the market. Just like many people were skeptical whether there would ever be personal computers in every home, many companies are quietly bracing themselves for what seems like an impending disruption of incredible scale. With the current 1.7 million trucking jobs in the United States, it's still unclear just how many people could be out of work once these self-driving vehicles hit the roads in full autonomy. Predictions by MIT's Technology Review place this technology at 5 to 10 years before it's fully available. However, it's certain that it will forever alter the nature of the commercial driving industry. And if you like, you can check out our Big Rig Banter episode number 9, all on this topic, autonomous trucking and more. But throw in some alternative energy sources like natural gas and hydrogen fuel cells into the mix, and we're bound to see a gigantic shift in the types of vehicles and drivers making their way across the United States and many countries throughout the world.
All right, Connor, thanks for submitting that. I do appreciate it. For those of you who have not heard the Big Rig Banter podcast, go and check that out. There's a link in the show notes. It's a really cool podcast. 2 non-truckers, but they really do the research. So I've actually learned some things listening to their podcast, and they're really good at it. They've got great production quality, and I think you'll really enjoy the podcast if you go check them out. They've just got maybe 7 or 8 episodes right now, so get in early. That way you don't have to go back and binge listen like so many people do to podcasts when they find something new that they like. Get in now. Okay, now let's get to the story I wanted to cover this time. This is one I found on the truckersreport.com. Link in the show notes. It's called Tesla Semi Promises 500-mile range, safety, and more. Okay, so here's the thing about this article. Just let me quickly sum it up for you. For those of you who don't know, Tesla is a company that makes electric cars. I shouldn't have to tell you that, but you never know, so I've got to cover my bases here. And this truck looks really, really funky, for one thing. Very futuristic. It's just going to be hard to get used to seeing this thing if it ever actually comes to production. But anyway, okay, what are the features of this thing? Well, for one, there's 4 separate motors, and they're mounted on each rear wheel. So that's kind of different. It's said to go 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, which I guess a trucker shouldn't care about. That's when it's empty. But one thing you might care about is it'll get 0 to 60 in 20 seconds fully maxed out. That's what they say. An 80,000 pound gross, it'll go 0 to 60 in 20 seconds. That's pretty darn good, but that shouldn't surprise anybody who knows electric vehicles, because an electric vehicle, I mean, even if you've ever driven an electric golf cart, you know that when you step on the gas, so to speak, the accelerator pedal, it just launches you. These electric motors have a lot of torque, so it shouldn't surprise anybody that this thing can get up and scooting pretty quick. You know, another thing I noticed, and you'll need to go to the link in the show notes to look at the photos over here on the truckersreport.com. They've got a photo of the interior, like looking out the glass, and it is, the visibility is awesome. But it's also really weird because you're sitting in the middle. There's no passenger seat, so that might be an issue for some truck drivers. The thing is, I can't tell from the picture. It looks like there might be a little room to scoot by on the left-hand side, but if you're a fat trucker, you're going to have problems getting in that front seat. That's the first thing I noticed. Unless the side opens up or something, I don't know how those doors open. That's going to be very interesting. One other thing, this is, of course, battery-powered. It's electric, duh. That means that it has a really, really low center of gravity, which obviously is great for a truck. All of their cars have the same feature. They handle really, really well because while they are kind of heavy because of the batteries weigh a lot, they also, having that low center of gravity just helps them corner so much better and stuff. So that ought to help the truckers. And it's also saying that battery will give the driver 500 miles on a charge. And if you stop and go to one of the superchargers, charge for 30 minutes, that'll give you another 400 miles to finish out your day if you need to. Okay, that all sounds fine and dandy. Now, here is the problems. The first is that they did not mention how much this truck weighs. That is a major issue because with all those batteries, enough to run a truck pulling, a 40,000 pound load, 46,000 pound load, whatever it's going to be, that is going to be one heavy sucker. So that's going to be an issue. So maybe you'll only be able to take 30 or 40,000 pound loads. Maybe you can't take 45 or 46,000 pounds. So that's going to be an issue. Another issue I see is that there's only 2,000 superchargers right now across the United States. And they're saying, well, a trucker's got to take a 30-minute break, a mandatory 30-minute break after 8 hours. Okay, yeah, that's true. And maybe you could, recharge the truck while you're doing that. But there's only 2,000 of them around the United States. So what are the chances right when you need to take your break that there's going to be a supercharger just waiting on you? So that infrastructure really has to be built up before this thing is going to take off. Another thing I see might be a problem is reliability. It's a brand new vehicle. There's always problems with first run vehicles like this. There's problems with first run computers, phones, pretty much everything. It's just the first coming off the line are probably going to be prone to some problems, and the big manufacturers, like the Internationals, the Freightliners, Pete, Kenworth, they've all had years to perfect their designs and to make rugged parts that will withstand the life, out here on the road driving this many miles every year. And let's hope Tesla does that right, but I would not want to be the first one to buy one of these. The last issue I see is cost. They didn't mention what the actual cost of this thing is. They're talking as in numbers of how much per mile it costs to operate and stuff like that, but they didn't give a price tag. And you know, with the Teslas, you know, the fast Teslas starting around, you know, $80,000 or $90,000, I can't imagine this thing is going to be any less than probably $250,000 or $300,000. And really, who's going to be able to afford that? But you know what? If you can, you better order now, because they say they're going to be available in 2019. And you know what? Better you than me, because let's let you be the guinea pig, not me. All right, next up I wanted to share a quick mechanical tip. Now, I've been sitting on this sucker for a long time, and I just haven't had a chance to get to it. This comes from Mike Rogers, who is known as Pack Rat in our Slack group. He's in both of the Trucker Dump Slack groups and the iTruckers one that's designed for Mac and Apple loving truckers. Anyway, this happened in Denver. It must have been last year, possibly even, yeah, it had to be in 2016, although it might have been late 2015. Anyway, I've been holding on to it for that long. What had happened is I got to a shipper, and I was supposed to just pick up a trailer and go. I go and I hook up to it, and the red glad hand was busted off. Now, that's a problem because, well, for you non-truckers, the red one is the one that releases the brake. If that red hose is not hooked up, it will not release those brakes. The blue line is for controlling how much pressure goes to the brakes. Now, I sat there for a long time. I called my company. They sent out breakdown. Even though our yard was only like 5 miles away, it was rush hour, so it took the guy like an hour and a half to get there, and then like another 30 or 45 minutes to fix it. And afterwards, Mike saw me on Slack and said, "Why didn't you just put the blue hand on the red hand?" And I thought, why didn't I? You know, that is a really good question. Now, he did say that some of the blue, like the blue and the red hands, are slightly different. So, and it's designed that way so you can't fit them on there together. Or you can't swap them out accidentally and then screw up. But that, there's a way to do it. He was telling me that you can just knock off the little notch that keeps it from going on. Now, if I had done that, if I had known that tip in advance, I could have just hooked up to that trailer. I could have put the blue line on the red. Yes, that's unsafe. Yes, it's illegal. But like I said, I was 5 miles from our yard. I could have just hooked up, drug it back to our yard. Even if they were gone at the yard, there was a TA truck stop just maybe 2 miles down the road. You know, so that would have saved me a couple hours just by knowing this tip. So I hope that helps you. And thanks to Mike for mentioning that even though it came to me late and didn't help me any, maybe it will. I know the next time I see a broken red glad hand, I'll just vice grip that sucker off there and stick the blue hand on there. Anyway, hope that helps you. All right, now that you've learned something new, well, I'm not sure I'm going to teach you anything new, but at least you know about this problem. Anyway, I call this one reserved truck parking, convenience or exploitation. We've all heard that there's a shortage of truck parking. Truckers deal with it every day. The public can see it as we're lined up on interstate on and off ramps and crammed into Walmart parking lots. The government has even done the research to prove the problem is real. There's a link in the show notes to a study from the Federal Highway Administration called The Study of Adequacy of Commercial Truck Parking Facilities. Man, it's an exciting read, I gotta tell you. Actually, I only skimmed through it. Wow, it's deep. Anyway, if you're interested, check out the link in the show notes. But of course, who else knows about the truck parking issue? The truck stop owners. So what's their answer to the problem? Hey, I have an idea. Let's charge truckers money for these coveted parking spaces. Enter reserved truck parking. Dun dun dun. For you non-truckers out there, some of the large truck stop chains have decided to block off some of their premium spots for those willing to pay. As a world-class cheapskate, you can imagine how I feel about it. The idea behind reserved truck parking is that you can call ahead or go online and reserve your parking space early in the day so you know you'll have a safe place to park for the night. Sounds like a great idea, right? We'll come back to whether this works or not here in a bit. But first, let me tell you about my first and only experience with reserved truck parking. I had accepted a load from dispatch with the understanding that it was going to be really tight. The issue wasn't my available hours, the issue was time. Now, while that might sound like the same thing to you non-trucking folk, all you truckers know what I'm talking about. I had an 8 a.m. delivery at the Costco warehouse in Morris, Illinois. I was going to get there about 11 p.m., but the receiver didn't have overnight parking available on site. That's despite their humongous, always half-full parking lot. Ugh, I hate that. Anyway, luckily there are 2 truck stops within a couple blocks of my delivery. This was important because if I had to park for the night even 5 miles away, I couldn't have delivered on time. You see, if I started my mandatory 10-hour break when I got there at 11 p.m., my break would be up at 9 a.m. Problem is, I'd be late for my 8 a.m. appointment. But if I could find parking within 1 mile of Costco, I could drive over to the delivery in the morning while I was still officially on break, thanks to the very little bit of leniency my e-logs afford where it doesn't register me driving until I drive over 1 mile. So by the time they finished unloading me, my legal break would be over and I'd have another 11 hours to run. That's what I'm talking about. Now, I know some of you truckers out there are screaming at your phones right now, so let me explain to the non-truckers why you're losing your ever-loving mind right now. Officially, I could have delivered the load on time in a totally legal way by utilizing the god-awful 8-hour split sleeper berth. Wow, say that 5 times fast. Again, let me explain to the non-truckers out there. Normally, after driving for 11 hours, we're required to take a 10-hour break. There's also an option to only take an 8-hour break. So if I had used, say, 9 hours getting to the customer, I could take an 8-hour break, that must be all in the sleeper berth, and still have my other 2 hours to run. That's 9 hours of driving before the break, and 2 hours after equals the 11 total. After that, I need to take a full 10-hour break before I could drive again. Yes, it's as complicated as it sounds, which is why I avoid doing it like a meth head shuns toothpaste. And it almost always screws up your day somehow. In this situation, I was pulling in at 11 p.m. so I could move again at 7 a.m. after 8 hours in the sleeper. So as long as I was parked within 2 hours of the delivery location, I would have been on time for delivery. So you're right, trucker, but you also know why I didn't go this route. Let's look at the bigger picture, you non-truckers. Being in the sleeper from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. is 8 hours. I've already said that. I would then drive for 2 hours, deliver, and then go back on break for another 10 hours before I could drive again. Now you do a little math and you can see that my mandatory 10-hour break has effectively turned into an 18-hour break. No thanks. If I want to screw myself, I'll just sign up for a marathon or something. This is why it was so important to me to get close to Costco. The Pilot is smaller than the TA, but they both fill up pretty fast because they're some of the last truck stops on I-80 eastbound if you're staging to head into Chicago the following morning. Honestly, though, I wasn't worried about finding parking. Obviously, I was hoping to find a free parking spot, but if all else failed, I knew both locations had reserved truck parking. I drove through the Pilot lot. All full. No surprise. I thought about parking along the side street, but the only thing worse than paying for parking is a police officer knocking on your door in the middle of your break and telling you to move your truck. Not only does it suck getting woke up, but depending on how far you have to drive, it also might screw up your break, effectively putting you right back with the possibility of doing that 8-hour break like I was trying to avoid in the first place. I saw a reserved parking space, but I didn't give up just yet. I'm ever hopeful when it comes to saving a buck. You should know that by now. I drove over to the TA and they were just as jam-packed. No place to even park illegally that wouldn't have blocked another driver in. Now there are drivers who would do this, but I'm not one of them. But guess what? Yep, there was plenty of reserved parking at the TA. This is my point. There often is. I've included a link to a photo you should take a look at, link in the show notes. I took the photo at the TA in Greencastle, Pennsylvania, which happened to be the night of the overweight axle debacle, which was the subject of the last podcast. I was at that truck stop 4 or 5 times that night, did I say? 3? I don't remember. Something like that. Anyway, I was there a lot, and every time it looked exactly like this. For those of you who are going to be really, really lazy, it's a photo at night of the reserved parking space, and there is nobody there. And that place has a bunch of reserved truck parking. So anyway, now you get the gist of it. But you know what? The rest of the parking lot, it was jam-packed like a Casper mattress into a box. If you don't get what that is, look at the link. Surely you do if you're a podcast listener. Now, some drivers were even parked outside of legal spaces to avoid paying for a spot. That's not surprising either. That's just par for the course. So anywho, since the pilot was closer to Costco, I quickly drove back over, backed into the reserved parking space, with no pull-ups, I might add. Yes, I'm that awesome. And walked inside to pay. As I paid the $12, I told the cashier how much I hated it. Much to my surprise, the cashier and one of the managers told me they hated the paid parking too. Not only were they tired of hearing truckers gripe about it, oops, but it was also a pain to monitor the area to see if someone was trying to park there without paying. They also had to deal with the reservations, which they said was a major pain in the tuchus. My words, not theirs. So to bring this seemingly never-ending story to a close, I stuck the receipt in the window so no one would bother me, grabbed some shut-eye, and delivered on time without my e-log screwing me over. Yay! I win! Go me! Other than the fact that I had to pay to be victorious, which disturbs the innermost part of my being. Now here's the problem I see with reserved truck parking. Listen, I'm all for capitalism. If the truck stops think they can make some extra money by having reserved truck parking, then who am I to say they shouldn't do it? So with that, let me just say, you shouldn't do it. I guess these truck stops have forgotten that there used to be paid parking at lots of their locations. And I'm not talking about some of the parking spots. I'm talking about paying for parking anywhere in their parking lot. But for some reason that I honestly don't understand, they decided to quit charging for parking. Now, there are still a few holdouts near big cities, like the Greater Chicago Truck Plaza in Bolingbrook, Illinois, or a couple of TAs near Baltimore, just to name a few. Now, I haven't been out west in quite a while, but I'd bet a full naked body massage from the evil overlord that both the TAs in Ontario, California still charge to park too. Still, the vast majority of the paid parking truck stops have gone to a totally free model. You'll recognize them when you see the long-abandoned little booth that guards the parking lot from the outside world. So why is this? Perhaps because truckers were avoiding them to find free parking elsewhere. I'll bet if we can examine their books, we'd notice an uptick in gross revenue when they axed the paid parking. I mean, if more drivers are parking there for free every night, they're probably also buying fuel, eating in the restaurant, filling up their coffee thermos, and buying horrifically overpriced decade-old DVDs. That's just a guess, but why else would they quit charging for parking? My advice to them is give up. It doesn't work. I was talking to my friend Chris the other day. That's at driver Chris MC on Twitter and wherever else. He's also in our Slack groups. Good friend of mine. I was talking to him the other day, and somehow reserved truck parking was brought up. He said he used to reserve spots when he thought there wouldn't be any free parking by the time he got there, but he quit reserving in advance because he'd often arrive at the truck stop late at night and still find free parking available. He now waits until he arrives before he pays. So doesn't that defeat the purpose of reserved truck parking? At that point, I feel like it's more exploitation of drivers than it is convenience. Yeah, I know exploitation is a pretty strong word, but check out how the Google Dictionary defines it. Exploitation. 1. The act or fact of treating someone unfairly in order to benefit from their work. Okay, that one might be a stretch. Second definition. The action of making use of and benefiting from resources. Okay, now definition 2, that's getting warmer. The truck stop has a resource, the parking spot, and they're charging for the privilege of using it. Check out the third definition. The fact of making use of a situation to gain unfair advantage for oneself. Okay, now in my opinion, definition 3 nails it right on the head. They are making use of a situation, truckers not being able to find parking, to gain unfair advantage. Again, saying the act of charging for parking is unfair might be pushing it a tad bit, I'll admit. But in a sense, it is unfair because you have to pay for it simply because other drivers got there before you did. And if you paid in advance, like my friend Chris did, only to get there to still find free parking available, well, now you've paid for a parking spot that you no longer actually need. And that's kind of unfair too, isn't it? I looked on the Pilot Flying J website for refund information, and apparently you can't ask for a refund once you show up. You have to do it 4 hours before your reservation starts. So there's no backing out there. You're just out the $12. Now, whether all this is unfair or not is up for debate. But in my eyes, it's similar to that argument of just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Trucking companies and truckers keep these truck stops alive and kicking. And to thank us for that, they take advantage of us when we least need to take their crap. After a long day of driving, when we just need a warm meal, a hot shower, and a place to lay down and recharge our batteries so we can do it again the next day. Is that so much to ask? Now, please don't get me wrong. I'm grateful that truck stops exist. Without them, there'd be even fewer places to park, and we'd probably start seeing truckers squatting behind bushes on the side of the highway. God help us. But do they really need to charge us for the last few parking spaces when we're at our most desperate? I mean, come on. They're already charging $8 for a tiny bottle of Pepto-Bismol. Isn't that exploitation enough?
Hey, yo, bud, where do you want this load of feedback?
Hey, it's some feedback. Have I done that before? That kind of sounds familiar. You know, after 125 episodes, you kind of lose track of what you've done. And, well, I'm not going back to see if I'm repeating myself. You just have to be like the evil overlord and put up with the same jokes I tell over and over and over for 30 years. Sorry about that. Anyway, you know what? You people did not disappoint me. If you remember right on the last episode, I had pretty much caught up with my feedback, and I was just saving one from Renae because I just wanted to make sure I had something to read on the podcast. Well, guess what? Lots of you guys wrote in anyway, so that's awesome. But you know what? We're going to start out with Renae anyway. So this is from Renae Savage. She is, she used to be, I think she's still a member of our Slack group, but like I said last time, she's dropped off the face of the earth. I wish I knew where she was. Renae, if you're listening to this, give me a shout and let me know you're okay. Anyway, she is responding to, I don't even remember what episode it was or anything. The comment came in on episode 121, How to Find a Great Truck Driving Job, where I was announcing my book. I don't remember exactly what I said in there, but I must have said something about trainers being able to train when they only have 6 months of experience themselves. And I found that preposterous and quite crazy. It was like, does that really happen? Well, she writes in. Renae says, I know for a fact that you can become a trainer with only 6 months experience. I did it. Oh, okay. They also have forced teaming. I don't know who they is yet. We'll get to that. They team a person with only 4 weeks with an experienced, air quotes, trainer with someone who's been out for another month or so. Sometimes less if they're pressed for placements. The more experienced driver becomes the lead driver who is in charge of trying to train the newer guy or gal. During this time, I was also trying to train them because they didn't get the skills they needed from their actual trainers. I taught everything from Qualcomm to shifting to handling the paperwork and shippers and receivers. I told them if they couldn't figure out backing, we were in trouble. Well, Renae, the company I was with when I first started out did something very similar. I explained this in the book Trucking Life, how they did this. Link in the show notes. Anyway, our first company, the Evil Overlord and I went to work for them together. We both had to go with separate trainers for a little bit. Our long sagas of our training experiences and how different they were, also in the book. Anyway, once we were done with that, I don't remember, it was like 3 weeks or something like that. Their normal practice was to take those 2 brand new people straight out of school, had just went through training with their individual trainer, and then stick them together as a team. So I know what you're talking about here. The good thing is we were already married, so they just stuck us together. So basically, we just helped each other like any other couple of guys or gals would. The difference is I knew her intimately, and it would really suck to have to go in with somebody else that you didn't know and trust. Anyway, she goes on. She says, I'm not saying it's right, good, or makes any sense whatsoever. Well, that's obvious. She says, I'm just saying that a lot of the drivers for CR England you see are both rookies in every sense of the word, and the blind are leading the blind. Okay, so we're talking about CR England. This doesn't exactly surprise me either now. She says, when I trained, I never turned down assistance from other drivers, no matter what the skill or situation. I saw a lot of trainers get their ego bruised and reject the help. Dumb. Just plain dumb. I agree. Being a trainer, I imagine there is a lot of ego involved with that. Reading this just makes me more convinced that I'm glad I never actually became a trainer. Anyway, she says one good aspect of CR England training is they really push the training videos and safety. I told my teammates and my students they'll learn more from those videos and quizzes than almost any trainer out there. Now, that may have been an exaggeration, and they may be doing things differently since I left in May of 2016, but it was true from my experience. They had some really good trainers, students, and staff, but they also had the other end of the spectrum, a lot of them. Yeah, with a company that big, I'm sure they do. She says, I left because of pay issues. My students were driving more than me, and she says, as it should be, yes, it should be, and somehow bringing home more on their paychecks. Well, that's uncool. Solo loads when driving as a team or student trainer don't pay the rent, especially when it goes on for a couple of months. Yeah, I can imagine not. The things I take away from the experience are a Class A CDL and knowledge of what I didn't like about the big company. The training available is really good. It's just a matter of working your butt off to teach yourself. I did my best for my students, but I knew my own knowledge and experience were lacking, so I taught them where to find the resources to teach themselves. Well, that was wise of you. So, maybe you have more knowledge and experience than you thought. She says, did I sleep in the bunk when they drove? Yes, after working double shifts with almost no sleep for 2 weeks first. I sat with them and trained until I knew they wouldn't kill us or anyone else. Then I passed out with one ear constantly monitoring. If they stopped for almost any reason, I was awake. So basically, I didn't really sleep for months. In the almost 5 months I trained, I lost 40 pounds and looked like a heavyweight boxer had been sparring with me for a few hours. What I found out was that I enjoy teaching. Was it worth the lack of sleep and stress? The pay wasn't, but the guys I trained could drive and do the job without risking themselves or others. I'll call that worth it. Well, I'd call that worth it. You know, I think training is a commendable job. It needs to be done, and it needs to be done by somebody who is good at it and really cares and has that teaching attitude like you were talking about, Renae. Unfortunately, I don't know what the percentage is, but I have a feeling there is a lot of bad ones out there, at least from my experience and the people I've talked to. So thanks for your email, Renae. I appreciate it. Again, holler at me in Slack and let me know where you are. Next up, we're going to hear from Tim Rife. He writes, Hey Todd, I bought your book on Amazon, How to Find a Great Truck Driving Job. I have tried several links from the Kindle edition to get to the questionnaire that you pimp repeatedly throughout the book with no luck. Dropbox keeps coming up with the 404 error. Since I've already paid for the book, I don't want to now have to pay for the questionnaire as well. Can you send me a working link to it? Well, actually what I did for Tim is I just sent him the actual document because, well, yeah, it's screwed up. It was screwed up. It still is, actually. I do have it fixed, but I am waiting. In the process of this, I actually figured out that I had a few spelling errors in there, so I got that. I'm getting that fixed right now, and the new version should be updated. So Nobody else has complained about this in the past, but just in case you bought that book and you had trouble downloading the questionnaire, the trucking company questionnaire that comes with it, then you will know you are not alone. And if you just email me, truckerdump@gmail.com, I will make sure you get a copy of that, at least until the new version gets up on Amazon and iBooks. iBooks is actually going to be a lot longer before you see it, because they take a big long break around Christmas, and they don't really take new submissions, so I can't even update the book, unfortunately. But anyway, Tim, I appreciate you letting me know about this, because I would not have known, because honestly, I don't go back and read my own books and click on my own links to check stuff like that. So I appreciate it. Let's get on with the next email from Ryan. Okay, part of the fun of this show is listen to me butcher last names. Ryan Moed. I'm not sure. Moede. Sorry for butchering your name, Ryan, but that's how I roll. He writes, "Hey Todd, follow back on Twitter. Just followed you and it would have been super easy to send you a message there. But anyways, I emailed you to send you this to help yourself and others out." Well, I can tell you, Ryan, that actually I did follow you back, but it wouldn't have done you any good, because this email is way more than 140 characters. And now that Twitter has upped its limit to 280 characters, it's still way more. So anyway, you used the right format. I appreciate you sending the email. Anyway, he says, "Just started your podcast last week and just heard the overweight axle story. Now my 2 cents is, why the heck didn't he move the fifth wheel? 32,000 and some change on the drives and 11,400 on the steers? That's light, trucker. Slide that puppy back 3 notches and you would have been one and done. As in one reway and done, go hit the road. Each notch moves about 400 to 700 pounds depending on the load and how it's packed on the trailer. Also, a tip when sliding the fifth wheel. Drop the trailer landing gear to the ground, unlock the fifth wheel pins, hit the pins with a hammer to knock them in easily, and WD-40 the rails to slide it easy. Then hop in your truck in low gear, lock the differentials, and drop your airbags. I don't believe you mentioned those last 2 parts in your podcast when you talk about sliding the fifth wheel." Well, Brian, that's because my trucks have never had airbags that I could actually manually draw. But if I could, I would. That's a great tip. Anyway, he says it takes all the weight off the drives and puts it on the landing gear, which then allows the fifth wheel to slide easy as cake. The lock differentials allows for more grip on the ground. Attached is a picture to help you and other drivers in the future for weights on axles to refer to. He put a link, or he put a picture in the email, and it is actually the exact same picture that I have available on my website at abouttruckdriving.com/free-stuff. Check that out, or just go to abouttruckdriving.com and there's a navigation thing that says free stuff, and you'll be able to find this PDF and you can download it. I've actually altered it just a little bit, but it is pretty much the exact same thing. And he also writes, "Hope you know these tricks being in the industry for 20 years. You've got 18 years on me in the industry, but I also hope my email helps you and other truckers out. Hammer down and come on." Okay, Ryan, I'm going to come on. That's a trucker. That's a CB thing for all you non-truckers who don't know what the heck we're doing. Come on. I don't know why truckers do that. Anyway, so it looks like he's got 2 years of experience and he's figured out quite a lot about this. But, Ryan, unfortunately, you are wrong about one thing. Okay, you mentioned that all I had to do was slide the fifth wheel a few notches and it would have been one and done. The problem with it is I was not overweight on the drives. I was overweight on the trailer. And as you can clearly see from your picture that you sent me, the tandems, when you move the fifth wheel forward or backward, there is no change on the tandems on the trailer. It doesn't affect that weight at all. So you kind of got that mixed up there, dude. So unfortunately, I mean, I would like to think with 20 years of experience that I would have done that if it would have worked, but it would not have worked. So I didn't do it. So sorry to disappoint and call you out on the show, but I just had to call you out. Make sure you know from in the future that that's not going to work if you're trying to move your weight on your tandems, your trailer tandems, if you're moving your fifth wheel. I mean, you're welcome to try it and tell me if it works, but I have never got it to work. So if you get it to work, it's going to be some weird, crazy load from outer space or something. I don't know how that could possibly work. But anyway, I do appreciate you sending in the email and trying to straighten me out. But the tip for sliding the fifth wheel, that's great stuff right there. He also says, as a PS, he says, here's his best tip. Save up to $10,000 down payment and go buy a new Peterbilt. And go owner-operator and lease onto a company like Mercer or Landstar. I think you would enjoy it and your wallet would too. But buy new, stay safe, and hammer down. You know, Ryan, I have heard that more and more. The old consensus used to be that you would buy an older truck that you could pay off really fast, or that you could just pay outright cash for. But then you're always fixing it. And I've been hearing more and more stuff lately about people saying that the lease option is not really a bad deal anymore because everything's covered under warranty. I don't know if that's true or not, but and I'm not going to bother doing the math because I have absolutely no interest in becoming an owner-operator. The only reason I would is if I found a really good deal right by my house that would get me home every day and I could just run out and back. I would probably buy a truck for that. But the problem is I'm not looking for anything like that. So nobody's going to come knocking on my door offering it to me. So I doubt I ever do it. But hey, if you're looking for, to get into owner operating, anybody out there, then, you really need to do your math and make sure you know which route you want to go. I'm not sure which one I would go with. They both seem like they have their merits. I'm just not sure. So I'm glad I don't have to make that decision. So hey, we're going to finish up with something really fun here. Well, I'm assuming it's going to be fun. Let me set this up. I'm not sure if Shannon did this in the note or in his audio comment or not. This is from Shannon Holden. He is a friend of mine. He's in our Slack group. Did I say Slacker? Slack group. The High Truckers Slack group, and he's also in the Trucker Dump Slack group, and he's also part of the Facebook page. Man, I forgot to mention the Facebook page. Find that at Trucker Dump Podcast. Facebook.com/Trucker Dump Podcast. And if you want the group that is associated with that, just search for the name because it's a screwed up thing. Or I put those links in the show notes, so you can check that out at the bottom of the show notes. Also, for the record, all the show notes for all of these podcasts are at the bottom of each blog post. So, just so you know that. So there's lots of things I talk about in the podcast that are not in the blog post. So all of those links are down at the bottom of the blog post at abouttruckdriving.com. Check that out. So anyway, let me set this up. Shannon and I are both Apple geeks. We love Apple stuff. And we were debating about the new iPhone. They took away the headphone jack last year. So the iPhone 7 came out and it did not have a headphone jack. And it came with these things that Apple call earpods, basically, earbuds. And they had to have an adapter because there was no headphone jack. And we thought that was kind of weird, but I just thought they would just keep doing that. But Shannon was convinced that they were going to go all Bluetooth this year. And he said, no, when the iPhone 8 comes out, it's going to have Bluetooth and it's going to use the AirPods. Well, the AirPods, for those of you who don't know, are Apple's Bluetooth earbuds that stick in your ears. They kind of look like white snot hanging from your ears, but they are super handy, and not having a cord is awesome. But anyway, I knew they weren't going to do that because those things cost $160, and I knew darn well Apple is they're not going to throw something like that in the box. So we had a bet, and the bet was if there were AirPods in the case that came free with the iPhone 8, that I would get on this podcast and I would rant, or I would not rant, I would gush about how awesome of a person Shannon is. So, in return, if I won, he was going to have to do the same for me. Send in an audio comment, and that is what we're dealing with today. He's going to gush on and on about how awesome I am. I don't even know how long this is. I have not listened to it because I wanted to have a genuine reaction to it along with you guys. So what you're hearing is live. I'm going to play this and keep my mic on in the background, and I'm sure I'm going to be stopping this thing on and off because I have a feeling, I don't know that it's going to be funny. It might really disappoint me, but I don't think it will because I know Shannon, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be full of a lot of backhanded compliments. So let's see what we've got here. Oh boy, here we go. Oh boy, this is going to be great. I just noticed he titled the file The Awesomeness of Todd. Of course. What else would it be called?
Here's a little story I like to call The Awesomeness of Todd.
Oh yeah.
Well, crap. A bet is a bet, and I lost a bet. Now I have to say nice things about Todd. I wish you would have just bet $1,000 or something. That would have been way easier to come up with. Just saying. So, just how awesome is Todd? Well, let me count the ways. For one, he's a pretty good storyteller on his monthly podcast that comes out semi-annually. I really get a kick out of hearing him ramble on about this or that. Secondly, he's clearly more awesome than I am, at least when it comes to accurately guessing what accessories the iPhone X will come with, or rather, what it won't come with. Lastly, he's clearly more awesome than I am at not spending money. All of the drones I've purchased, case in point.
Yep.
I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but for the purpose of this, we'll just say it is. There you have it. The awesomeness of Todd, summed up in one brief little message. I hope this satisfies my debt to you. I will definitely choose my battles more wisely in the future. Take care, and goodbye.
Oh, yeah, that was totally awesome. That's, that'll teach you to bet me. Don't be messed with me. I'm the Apple Man. Well, thanks for paying up there, Shannon. I did have to ride Shannon quite a bit to get him to do this thing. I kept reminding him over and over in the Slack group. I was like, hey, where's my audio clip? Don't you owe me an audio clip? Hey, shouldn't you be working on an audio clip right now? I was pretty relentless. But he finally paid up, and I'm so glad he did. That was totally awesome. And so worth it. Unfortunately, the AirPods didn't come with, and he was right, it was the iPhone X we were talking about, not the iPhone 8. But either way, I mean, the iPhone X is a $1,200 phone, so there's no way they were going to stick them in with that thing. That thing's expensive enough already. But anyway, it just proves that I'm right, and I love being right, because it happens so rarely. Anyway, I think we can shoot this sucker right in the head and kill it off and be done with it. I think we're about done. Oh, no, wait. There was one other thing I wanted to do. When somebody takes the time to write an iTunes review, I really appreciate it. It helps my rankings. So far, I've gotten really good rankings over there. And I got another one from someone calling himself Horrid Genius, which is a great username. That's awesome. He calls it my top-rated podcast yet. Wow. I didn't see that before. He says, Todd McKinnon is entertaining and provides the right humor to keep anyone interested. His experience have provided me tips and tricks, how to handle certain situations, and helpful reviews on apps, products, and more. I listen to this podcast religiously and wish that he would release more in a shorter frame of time. But the wait is worth it. Now if he would have the evil overlord do some podcasts of her own to increase the competition. Well, Horrid Genius, that would be awesome. I would love to have her on the podcast sometime, but I think the chances of her even making a cameo appearance on here is pretty freaking slim. She likes her anonymity. She likes that nobody really even knows what she looks like. Very few people have seen her picture She just kind of likes that fact because she's weird like that. Anyway, I appreciate the review. If you would like to leave a review on iTunes or Google Play, wherever you get this podcast, I would certainly appreciate it. Once again, I appreciate everybody listening. I appreciate all the contributors to the show. This was great having 3 different voices on it this time. I'd love to get more audio comments from you folks. You can just say something into your phone, record it on your voice recorder app, and email it directly to truckerdump@gmail.com. All I ask is that you do it while you're sitting still. Don't do it going down the road because 1, it's unsafe, and 2, because it sounds like crap. It's really hard for me to edit and filter out the noise. So just stop the truck for the night. You have to stop for 10 hours anyway, and say what you got to say. With the truck turned off, send it in. I'd love to hear from you guys. I do have a couple more comments still for next week. Or next week. What a joke. That's possibly the funniest thing I've said this entire podcast. Next week. Oh, I'll be lucky. Well, there's not a chance of me getting one out before the new year, so don't plan on it. Anyway. You know what? If you'd like to help the show, you know what you can really do? No, not go buy the books. Well, you can do that. But this time what I mean is if you are a podcast listener and you enjoy podcasts, please tell your friends, not specifically about the Trucker Dump. You're welcome to do that. But just tell them about podcasts in general. Tell them what they're missing. That is a goal of mine of 2018 that I am really going to try to get the word out because I have discovered that truckers just don't really even know what podcasts are. And as you can imagine, it makes it really hard for me to pick up new listeners because they're either not tech savvy, or they just don't care, or they've never even heard of them. But I have to think there are so many good podcasts out there with all kinds of subjects they just cover the board, that there's no reason why these truckers should not be taking advantage of all of this free content. You know, you can download it anytime you want. You can listen to it anytime you want. You don't have to be tuned into XM radio at a particular time to catch a certain host or a certain show. It's not like that. You can just download these things. I mean, it covers everything: sports, knitting. I heard recently there was a guy who was actually making a living doing a chameleon breeding podcast. Yes, you heard that right. So there are all kinds of subjects. Anything you're interested, you're probably going to find a podcast on it, and the vast majority of them are free. So if you want to help the podcast, spread the word about podcasts in general. Hey, one more thing before we go. As I mentioned earlier, I have a Facebook page now. We have a Facebook group. It's called Trucker Dump Podcast. Just search for that in Facebook. I would really like for you guys to join that thing. I've got a poll that I just put up that I would love for you to take. I've had some advertisers talk to me recently, and they want to know my numbers, and I can give them those, but they also want to know what my demographic is, and I don't really know what that is. I don't need to know your age range and all that stuff. What I'm interested in, and what I think the advertisers are interested in, is what type of a trucker you are. I mean, are you an owner-operator? Are you a company driver? Are you retired? Are you just interested in trucking? Are you not a trucker at all? Are you getting ready to become a trucker? Or just maybe have an interest in thinking about becoming a trucker. Got a poll over there. I just kind of want to get an idea of who you guys are. So I would love it if you'd go over there, join the Facebook. It's called the Trucker Dump Podcast. If you don't do that perfectly, you're going to end up on a site with a latrine. So make sure you search for Trucker Dump Podcast Group, or there's a link in the show notes. And please go over there and take that poll. Thank you. Okay, enough about that. I think we're done for the day. I think we've got some awesome music. So, what's your opinion of reserved truck parking? Do you use it? Why or why not? Send your thoughts or suggestions for the podcast to truckerdump@gmail.com, or follow me on Twitter where I'm @ToddMcCann. Yep, that's 2 D's, 2 C's, and 2 N's. Facebook is a thing for me now too, so don't forget to join the Trucker Dump Facebook group and take the poll. Just search for Trucker Dump Podcast to find it, or click the link in the show notes. And don't forget those show notes can also be found at the bottom of each blog post at abouttruckdriving.com. As always, I appreciate you continuing to listen and subscribing. You have subscribed, haven't you? So until next time, drive safe, stay out of my way. Officially, I could have delivered the load on time in a totally legal way by utilizing the god-awful 8-hour split sleep. Officially, I could have entered the... Officially, I could have... Son of a... Oh. Good Lord, I can't talk today. I did my best for my students, but I knew my own knowledge and experience were lacking, so I taught them where to find the resource to... Okay, I'm not sure if you can hear that, but the sound might be just a tad bit different. What the heck was that? So, what's your opinion of reserve... Wow. Hard to talk when you got that in there.